Good morning everyone. So this is the second time we are meeting today. We will continue with our lecture series of industrial relations. In the last lecture we've studied about what do we mean by industrial relations. Then we've talked about the evolution of industrial relations in India. Industrial relations, we'll just recap it a bit because the continuation topics that we will discuss today. In the crux, it talks about industrial relations. It will revolve around industrial relations. So let's recap it a bit, what we have discussed yesterday. In the earlier series, we've discussed that industrial relations is nothing but a correlation or interrelationships amongst various stakeholders that are within the industry. We've talked about what were the various stakeholders: government, employer, employee, and even trade unions. We've discussed that the interrelationship between these organizations, these stakeholders amongst each other is, as a whole, is known as industrial relations. Okay. Then we had discussed about the example of Maruti Suzuki, just to explain it a little bit better, that it has management, it has workers, it has trade unions, and government also regulates the activities of not only trade unions but also the management, and it provides policies that provides benefits to the workers. This is the broad context in which we will continue to learn the topic of industrial relations in today's lecture. Okay. So let's start. In the previous lecture, we've talked about whatever history of labor movement in India, from Indigo Commission to Factories Act to modern trade unionism because of Russian Revolution, domestic political context, and even merger of trade unions and they providing a united front against the British, not only for their rights but also for independence struggle too. Then we've talked about various definitions given by various scholars. J.T. Dunlop, we've talked about that he had provided a definition of industrial relations based on a system, that he defines industrial relations a system where all the stakeholders are interacting within a constraints. Okay. Similarly, we talked about Lester's definition, who talked about managing or arriving at a solution between two conflicting interests. We talked about that management has a different interest and the workers have a different interest with respect to wage, with respect to freedom, and with respect to various other things. Then we discussed Dale Yoder's definition. He mentions about employees, employers, and even the government organizations, the relationships among them arising out of employment. Similarly, we've discussed about various definitions from Indian scholars too. And then at last we've talked about the definition of industrial relations based on International Labour Organization. International Labour Organization in totality covered each and every aspect of industrial relations that we've discussed earlier. And it also talks about social dialogue too, that all the stakeholders must engage in a social dialogue in order to arrive at a solution, in order to arrive at a peaceful solution, in order to address each other's grievances, in order to converge on the company's interest, on the nation's interest. So this we had discussed earlier. From now on, we'll discuss what are the importance of industrial relations, what are the objectives of industrial relations, what are the factors that affect industrial relations, and then we'll continue to move further. And at last we'll talk about some of the approaches to understand industrial relations, in which we will talk about the sociological approach, in which we'll talk about the psychological approach, the Gandhian approach, the System approach. System approach we've already discussed that Dunlop has given. We'll also talk about Oxford approach. Okay. So let's see how much we can cover in our today's lecture, and let's start. Okay. So first we'll talk about what is the importance of industrial relations. Industrial relations, we all know it is the relationship amongst the stakeholders of the industry. Okay. So we need a very positive relationship amongst the stakeholders, because if the relationship will not be positive, then there will be various issues in the industry, and these issues we'll discuss later. But importance of industrial relations is important because it will ensure continuity of production. When all the stakeholders will be happy, then the production will continue to flow. There will be uninterrupted flow of production. Okay, and there will be efficiency in the industry, and capacity utilization of industry will be higher. Similarly, obviously it is a vice versa thing. If the workers are happy, there will be less industrial disputes. Similarly, high morale will be there. Workers will continue to work. Mental revolution is nothing but just the high morale of workers, in which they are working in consonance with the objectives of the company too. And last but not the least, it will result into reduced wastage. Because if the workers or if the management will continue to be in conflicts amongst each other, then the wastage, then the time period in which production hasn't been used, it will be an opportunity cost, and it will be an wastage for not only the plant but also for the local economy, also for the nation's economy. If various industries various manufacturing plants start getting conflicts within them. Okay, so this is very basic understanding that good industrial relations is the basis of higher production, minimum cost, higher efficiencies, higher capacity utilization. Okay, it will result in an atmosphere of an industrial peace. And see, most of the things that we will talk about, it will sound generic, but these are 3 to 5 points which are interconnected amongst each other, and this can be used in important objectives, and through this you can also come to know about the causes and effects and impacts of bad industrial relations. So we'll talk about what are the main objectives of industrial relations. First and foremost, as we've already discussed in the historical evolution of labor industrial relations in India, we've talked that how the situation of workers were not good, and the government and even the management weren't listening to them. So the first and primary objective of industrial relations is to safeguard the interest of workers. Labor management by securing the highest level of mutual understanding. This is the only way possible through which they can come upon at a conclusion where both parties can benefit with the objective. Similarly, other main objective, if they can come at a peaceful understanding, it will avoid industrial conflict. It will avoid industrial strife. So this is our primary objective, to safeguard the interest of labor, to avoid industrial conflicts. Because these things, industrial conflicts, as we discussed earlier, increases the inefficiencies within the plant system. And if we avoid industrial conflict, obviously the productivity will rise, obviously the efficiency will rise. So it is a given thing. Similarly, another objective is to establish and promote the growth of an industrial democracy. What do we mean by industrial democracy? Democracy is basically power to the people in a broad sense. So similarly, in an industrial democracy, we can infer it as a power to the workers or power to the people, which includes workers, management. So each and every group must be heard, must be listened, so that they can resolve their issues if they exist. Okay, eliminate or minimize the number of strikes. It is management and political governance, socialization of industries by making the state itself a major employer. Okay. So these are the major objectives through which we will be understanding our concept industrial relations. Now, this is another major topic that we will discuss. What are the factors that can affect industrial relations? Make that broad context in mind. Whatever we will discuss, we should understand that industrial relations is an interrelationship. So whatever factor that we can discuss, we will discuss. You will be able to understand it more. Okay. So first is institutional factors. Institutional factors such as independent institutions that govern the policies, the agreements, social institutions, community, government. So how do they impact industrial relations? We can discuss. Institutional factors. Suppose in institutional factors, government had released various codes, code on wages. So in it, the government has mentioned, suppose, a minimum basic income. What will be the minimum income? Any work cannot go beyond that. So suppose minimum pay government has made 178 rupees per day, which is right now India's minimum pay, minimum wage. Okay. So any industry, any employer, any management cannot go below this income. So because of government actions, because of institutional action, this relationship emerged. Now you get this. Because of these factors, institutional factors, industrial relations, which is a relationship between management and employee, which we mean that relationship between the stakeholders of an industry, changes. Otherwise, management to reduce cost can go below that also, even if it goes against the workers. So that's why institutional factors play a major role. Another example of institutional factors we can discuss, which is a latest one. Let's understand this. Recently, government has passed code on social security. And within that social security, it had talked about providing social security to gig economy workers. What do we mean by gig economy workers? All of you, while going to the airport, while going to the railway station, must have booked an Ola. The driver who is working with Ola is not a direct employer, but a freelancer, you can say. Another example, the Swiggy, Zomato delivery people, they are not directly employer. So, providing freelancers who right now at that point of time didn't had social security benefits that all full-time employees get. So because of code on social security, these people will also get social security benefits. In this manner, management, even when they're employing these people, has to provide social security benefits to these people also. In this manner, institutional factors do impact industrial relations. I hope there is no doubt. If there is any doubt, please do inform me. Okay, through your comments, then we can explain it in a bit more detail through more examples. But for now, let's move on to the next factors. Next factor are economic factors. Under economic factors, we talk about the major demand and supply of labor, even the major ideologies. Suppose we will talk about economist factors. Two major things we will discuss. First of all, on ideological lines, we will compare USA and USSR, erstwhile Soviet Union, which was a socialist state. USA, capitalist. In capitalist system, there is minimum to no interference by the government. In socialist system, most of means of production are owned by government. Now think how these two factors affect industrial relations. Here, the management has the most power. Here, the workers has the most power. And this is a clear divide. Here, the workers don't have much power. They can easily get hired, they can easily get fired. And here, to fire a worker or even remove or suspend a worker, the government will get involved. How did you do that? You have no permission because the authority lies at the top. Because of these two things, these two economic ideological things, industrial relations affects. And this can also be seen within Indian economy too. Let's understand this. As we all know, initially we started with the mixed economy concept, or more of a socialist concept, and most of means of production were owned by the government. It reached its peak till 1970s, where even bank nationalization happened. Most of the sectors were converted into PSUs. Government owned sectors. Only few sectors were open to private sector. So at that point of time, industrial relation will be more of a socialist system that we have discussed earlier. But after 1991 LPG reforms, the economy started to open. We had done full current account convertibility. Okay, so most of the things, and we moved towards more of a capitalist kind of thing, and that's where our industry started to grow, our economy started to grow, and right now at this point we have both mixed economy, where In few sectors we follow a socialist kind of setup where the government is the ownership, and in few sectors, and few, not only few, and various other sectors, the government has opened space for private sector to continue. Okay, in this manner, the economic factors affect industrial relations. Okay, now we will talk about technological factors. How do technology affects industrial relations? Okay. Let's take a basic example of Maruti Suzuki. Initially, suppose before the advent of IT solutions, if one had to make a file for the procurement of a machine that can produce engines. Okay, if we have to procure a machine, obviously this file will go to higher management for their approval. Before IT solution, only one person was responsible to go move this file, and one person had to be responsible that file should not be lost somewhere. However, after arrival of IT solutions, this file system gets converted into a computer automated system where a person can start a request, and this request will get approved by different management levels at their own computer level through their own, wherever they are sitting. And because of this, see how much efficient this procurement system became, and how much wastage of paper and how much even mental space have been reduced, because one person had to all constantly on the think that where is the file, in which department is the file really approved or not, and he has to constantly follow up on that. Right now, after IT solutions, he can just open the portal and see at what stage it is stuck, on what stage, and who he or she has to contact in order to move that file. This manner, technology has changed the basic functioning of a company. Okay. Now we will understand another example of technology changing industrial relations. All of us have heard about AI. With the new tools like ChatGPT, BARD. It is a similar tool of Google recently announced, and it is a very recent technology, and everyone is actually comprehending what this technology will do in our space, in various spaces, because these technologies are capable of producing anything in text format right now. Any knowledge, any code, any marketing ads, copywriting ads, anything they can produce in a textual format. So these things will obviously affect the lower level workers in a hierarchy, in a company where the workers are at the base level. This will directly affect them, because the basic codes, basic copywriting, basic advertising, basic designing, these all tasks can be done by ChatGPT. One day or any other day, there will be various plugins or various applications, you can say, through which these things can be possible. So obviously these people will get affected, and the management, to reduce cost, obviously will opt this. So in this manner, you can see the relationship between the management and the workers do get affected because of the technological factors. Understand this? You can relate all of these factors and how do they impact by just pick anything. See how do they impact the relationship between management and company, management and government, employee and government, and you'll be able to understand the key essence of industrial relations. Okay. So these were the major factors that we discussed impacting industrial relations. And obviously not these three factors are not the only factors, but various other factors are on the periphery. Those three were the major, and these are obviously socio-political ideologies we've already discussed. And how do communist state affect industrial relations? How do capitalist state affect industrial relations? And similarly, international relations, global conflicts, domain knowledge. Obviously these two you can also relate. Suppose we can just talk about to understand how do global conflicts affect industrial relations. We can talk about incidents from World War. All the major industries of manufacturing were converted into war manufacturing units. The rights of workers and even management choices were neglected because at that point of time primacy were given to winning the war. In this manner, see how government relationship with workers and management were changed because of the global conflicts. Okay, and not only global conflict, global pandemics like situation also did affect our industrial relations. Let's see how, and this is, you all know, because we all had worst experiences of COVID-19 pandemic. At that point of time, in the second wave of pandemic, oxygen was highly demanded. But its supply was limited, and at that point of time the government has to take various radical steps to provide oxygen, because at that point of time the primary objective of government was to save people's lives. And for that, what they did, they talked to plants to generate oxygen, even though it was not their primary production. They asked pharmacy companies to provide vaccines in a low cost manner to save people's lives. So see how this relation, in the normal circumstances the company will sell based on their costs, it changed, and how the plants which had to produce other commodities at this particular point of time produced oxygen, because the primary objective was to save people's lives. So see how did industrial relations changed in this manner. Okay, so these things do affect industrial relations. So we had discussed factors affecting industrial relations. I hope you get all these things, and I hope even if you get any question regarding factors, you can adjust and you can infer, you can easily, logically can bring out the factors that can affect industrial relations in what manner. Okay. Now, parties to the industrial relations. This we've already discussed. You can say parties, you can say stakeholders, you can say what are the major constituents who interact amongst each other within an industry. So this we've already discussed. Employee, trade union, judiciary, government, employers, associations, and employer. Okay, these things we had discussed already. These two are additional: judiciary and employers associations. It's just another form of trade union, but at the larger scale. This is more in a plant sense, within a plant. Okay. Now we'll talk about employees. Employees, we all know, these are the basic thing. Employees working in an organized sector of our country, unorganized sector also, because we have a very high unorganized sector where most of our workers are working in there. And right now the government is actually working to formalize the unorganized sector through various means. Okay. And we'll just talk about the observation of Indian workers. We'll just get a glimpse just to understand in which sector do Indian workers are there present and what are the major sectors are there. Okay. So I had prepared this. I'll write here also just to get a very clear-cut factual information that we have right now as of 2020 476.67 million workers in India. And the sectoral distribution is the agriculture sector, still having the most workers, accounts for 41.19% of the total workers. Okay. The manufacturing sector possess 26.18%. Similarly, the service sector possess 32.33%. If you get a question that please arrange in sector wise the distribution of Indian workers, then you can say agriculture has more than service and service has more than manufacturing. Okay, in the next class I'll update you with recent figures. Okay, but this is the broad trend and it will continue. We've already discussed that government has enacted various laws to protect the Indian workers, and it has actually and government is dynamic also based on the new realities of the world. The government has adjusted, as we've already discussed, that how government has provided social security benefits to the gig economy workers. Okay. The employment pattern we've already discussed. Okay, now we'll discuss about the trade unions, which is also a party or a stakeholder to industrial relations. Trade unions were formed during the era of modern trade unionism that we've discussed earlier. Okay, At that point of time, because of the domestic factors, because of the Russian Revolution, trade unions saw a growth in India. Even the British colonial government, capitalist in nature, recognized trade unions. So they passed Trade Unions Act 1926 at that point of time. Okay, what are the major benefits or major objectives of trade unions? You can say to redress the bargaining advantage of individual worker, to secure improved terms and conditions with related to wage, working hours and working conditions also, to increase the extent to which union can exercise demarcation control over decision. Okay, and these are not just at the plant level. This can also be exerted at the industrial level, joint regulation, government level also. Various trade unions can go to the government and can talk about the basic demands that each industry, irrespective of different sectors, each worker should get. Okay, for example, basic minimum pay. Because each and every sector is different. However, there is a very basic base should be there for each and every worker to live a dignified existence. Okay. Now we'll talk about employers, management, you can say. So these people we'll discuss about them in detail actually. Okay. Management or promoter of the company, its main objective is to increase production that will lead to increased revenues, increased profit. Management can take major decisions with respect to plant location, hiring process, wage structure. So you can see the management in totality can control the economic destiny of a worker. Management control everything. If government doesn't put any regulation, if government doesn't put any compliances, then management can do anything. And the situation will be same of as we have discussed during British India, because their main objective is these things, and workers' interests, increased wage, reduced time, recess, holidays are contradictory to these things. Management, why will management listen if there is no government regulation? Because at the end it wants to promote profit. So that's why importance is given to government imposed regulations, and that's why even it has been changed. See, management's ability to control economic destiny of workers. Suppose if management decides that we'll open a plant in Gujarat and we'll close the plant in Manesar, then all the localized workers of Manesar, not all can relocate to Gujarat. So this indirectly affects them. Even if they say that we can relocate you, you can come over there. Some of us have a joint family, some of us cannot afford to go to another state. So in this manner, management controls the economic destiny of the workers. So this is a one negative connotation, negative perception that we saw management, but management also has the power to gain the loyalty of workers. I hope hope you have heard about the term compassionate capitalism. If not, check who coined this term. This is your task. Check who coined this term. In compassionate capitalism, management can also gain the loyalty of workers. Suppose COVID-19 pandemic is there. All the businesses are losing revenues, profit, business, deals, havoc is created. The whole world is at standstill. At this point of time, what the management will do? Should they lay off all the workers? If they do so, then how will they gain loyalty? Companies like Tata, Reliance, ITC, these companies took care of their people even during the COVID-19 pandemic when the worst was there, and especially to hospitality industry. That involves movement of people, but ITC still took care of their people. So in this manner, if workers feels that even in the worst conditions, when all are in the lockdown, nobody is working, still the company is paying them everything, so obviously they'll become loyal to these companies. The culture of these companies, if they are hospitable, if they are beneficial to workers, the workers will continue working there, and they will continue to mouth market the working condition to everyone. And that's why these companies are very big and very famous, not only because of their profitability, but also because of their working conditions. So compassionate capitalism means the capitalists or the management must take care of the workers, must give whatever profits they have earned to the society as well. Okay. So in this manner, we have seen the negative and the positive connotation of management, and the management always do have a choice to talk with the workers, talk with the workers association, talk with the trade unions, and be on the level playing field, be on the same page to address their issues and get the uninterrupted flow of production. Now we'll talk about employers associations. Employers association, CII, Chambers of Indian Industry, FICCI, ASSOCHAM, NASSCOM, these all are collective chambers or organizations that take care of Indian industry as a whole. This take care IT industry, Society of Automobiles of SAI take care of automobile sector. Okay, so these are just like trade unions take care of workers at the plant level. This is the organization at the national level which take care of employers whenever the government is in contact with. And how these organizations help? I'll tell you the latest example. We all have heard about Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. India opted out. India opted out of it because there were various issues that the Indian employers organization were raising. These organizations raised issues that Chinese cheap imports will flood the Indian markets and it will directly impact Indian industries. So we don't want that. So that's why they act as a pressure group. They had the major involvement in India's decision to opt out of RCEP. Okay. Now we understood the Employees Association too. See, representing employees in collective bargaining, developing machinery for the avoidance of disputes, representing members on national issue that we have discussed right now, as how India's decision to opt out of RCEP was influenced by CIA and FPK. Okay. Last but not the least, government and judiciary. Government, we have already discussed that it makes policies with respect to working of management, working of companies, with respect to wage boards, with respect to wages of workers, with respect to working hours of workers, with respect to their safety, with respect to even regulation of trade unions. So everything that come within the ambit of industry, we will talk about these things, whatever laws that government have made with respect to industrial relations, with respect to wages. Recently government has combined all the laws into 4 wages: code on wages, social security, industrial disputes and occupational safety. Okay. Government role is highly important because right now when technology is changing at a rapid pace, AI is coming, social media is there, gig economy is coming, it has already arrived, fintech innovation is constantly being done in form of UPI, DBT and other things. So because of these things, government has to adapt to take care of workers, because we've already discussed how technology impact the industrial relations, and if the government doesn't play any role, workers will be left with no option but to continue strike, or unrest will go on in the plants. Okay, so this is the major role of government. Now we will talk about judiciary. Judiciary, as we all know, if the issues are not settled at the plant level, the organizations, the workers must have a platform where their issues can be adjudicated or their issues can be resolved. So judiciary has the power to settle legal disputes, and they can even review the legislation which the government makes. If the government makes a legislation that can impact workers or that can impact the economic condition of the industries, the judiciary can also review. The management and the workers can directly go to the judiciary. Okay. Now we'll finish cause and effect of poor relations, poor industrial relations, demerits of bad industrial relations. Okay, we'll just finish this off, and then in the next class we'll complete approaches of industrial relations, approaches to study industrial relations, and then we'll talk about various different perspectives also. Okay. Now let's first learn about the causes of poor industrial relations. Causes of poor industrial relations. what do we think? What can be the causes of poor industrial relations? You can already answer this because you all know this. Poor industrial relations are result of unfulfilled demands of the workers. Unresolved issues of the workers. That we had discussed already while we were discussing evolution of labor activism in India, industrial relations in India. At that point of time, we have discussed that unsafe working conditions, long working hours, these were the major issues at that point of time. And then when they discussed these issues with the management and the government, they didn't get a very good response, and that's why they resorted to activism. So similarly, poor industrial relations are because of mental inertia on the part of management and labor. Nobody wants to understand each other's objectives. Nobody wants to understand, the labor don't want to understand that the management wants to reduce cost, and the management is not ready to understand that labor wants to increase its wages. Okay, so this is one point. Another point, intolerant attitude of contempt towards workers on the part of management. Suppose if worker did anything wrong and the management decide to fire this worker, then obviously an enmity between workers and management will develop. Why will the workers will trust the management even if the mistake doesn't, even if the mistake was not of a serious nature? See, inadequate fixation of wage or wage structure. Even in the mid 19th century or in the mid 20th century, we've discussed about a provincial act where it talked about certification, standing certification, where an employer must clearly with precision tells about in what conditions the worker will work in an employment, what will the wages be exactly at that point of time, what will be the contract, if any, of what duration. If these things are not fixed and the worker is still unsure of his working condition, the issues will come. Obviously at one point of time issues will come. Unhealthy working conditions. Suppose if the machinery is there and there is no fencing, harmful machinery is there, no fencing. Unfortunately, and we all don't want, at some point of time, one or more worker will get affected by this machinery. And at that point of time, they will realize. So, unhealthy working conditions, indiscipline, lack of human relation skill on part of supervisors. Supervisors treat, management makes supervisors as a person whose main objective is to increase the production. And keeping that objective in mind, he doesn't treat the workers on the line as humans. He wants the workers to continuously do their work without break because the number game is very important. So these are the major issues. Conflicting desire we've already talked about in the definition of Lester, that industrial relations is just an attempt to arrive at a solution between conflicting values and objectives. And see, this is very important. Inappropriate introduction of automation without providing the right climate or even without discussing with the workers. When workers are doing something and you are adding an automated machine, removing all these workers, and this you hasn't done without informing them and without accommodating them in some other departments, then obviously industrial conflicts will arise. These things are given. Unduly heavy workloads, and this is because of the employment contract hasn't been precisely written. Inadequate welfare facilities. Suppose if a worker, there are two workers, one is full-time employment, on full-time employment, and one is on contract workers. They usually have 1 or 2 year of contract. One basic insurance is there, some basic, and no more than, no PF is there, no social security is there, which are all within the FTEs. They also have company insurance policies. The company take care of them. So the mismatch between the working conditions of contract workers and the full-time employment workers and the work which the both are doing are same, then obviously it will reduce the morale of contract workers and they will feel injustice being done to them. Undue dismissal, we've talked about retrenchment, dismissals, lockouts on part of management and strikes on the part of workers. Inter-union rivalries, because of the growth of unions, what management usually does, within one trade union they make another faction and they make both fight in order to secure their interests. General economic and political environment such as rising prices, strikes by others. So the domestic and international environment, the impacts of which we've already discussed earlier. What now we will discuss? Effects of bad industrial relations. Obviously, you tell me, now that we have discussed it a lot, what will happen if the industrial relations are bad? Obviously, strikes, lack of industrial peace, loss of production, for government, lack of taxes because the production is not going on, the revenue is not generated and the taxes are not coming. See, everything we will see here. Demerits of bad industrial relations. Effect on workers, loss of wages because the workers are not, if the industrial relations are bad, that means management is not listening and even the government is not listening. So the loss of wages, obviously, because the management will try to increase its profit by reducing costs and the wages of workers is nothing but another cost center to the company. Okay. Physical injury, death on account of violence during labor unrest, excesses by employers, economic losses, bitterness in relations, adverse effect on career. Obviously, effect on employers, less production, less profit, their normal functioning of the company will get affected. Human relations and even the image of the company will get damaged. And obviously, if the company is listed on stock exchange, the company's stock will get hammered on the stock exchange. Effect on government, when the industry will not work, the revenue will not generate, the profits will not be there, and the cut of the government in taxes will not be there. So loss of revenue. Lack of order in society, obviously it will become a situation of law and order if the labor unrest continue to persist. Effect on consumers, obviously if the production will not be there, then the supply of the goods will not be there, and when the supply of goods will not be there, the inflation will come. Rise in prices and other effects, obviously international trade climate, and the reputation of Indian workers will get damaged. The whole world will see that Indian workers are not disciplined and not collaborative if the labor issues continue to persist. So industrial conflicts are not beneficial to any stakeholder within industrial relations. That's why various scholars had tried to convey that social dialogue, peaceful dialogue is necessary to resolve disputes, to work in tandem with each other, to understand each other's interests, so that all the stakeholders can work collaboratively for the growth of nation's economy, for the growth of company, and for the growth of workers as well. Okay. We'll just go and revise what we had discussed in today's lecture. So first, we had discussed the importance of industrial relations, objectives of industrial relations, and then we had discussed the major things, such as what are the factors that affect the industrial relations. First, we talked about institutional factors. We talked about various institutions that play major role, such as government, which had enacted code on social security for social gig workers, for gig workers. So another factor that we had discussed were economic factors, in which we discussed the capitalist and socialistic state of system. Then we had discussed about technological factors. We discussed about the IT revolution. Then we had discussed about the AI thing. Then we had discussed in detail about what are the stakeholders within the industrial relations. We discussed about the employees. We discussed about the sectoral distribution of employees in India. We discussed about trade unions. What are the major objectives of trade unions? See, whatever we had discussed earlier do help us in understanding other things, because we understood the evolution of trade unions in India or evolution of labor movement in India. We could easily understand the role and impact of trade unions. Then we talked about employers and how the employers can control the economic destiny of a worker, and we've talked about its positive and negative connotation. Okay, then we've talked about how employers organization such as CII, FICCI, all of these organizations protect the Indian industries whenever there is a major decision on the part of government during international trade. Then we've talked about the role of government. Then we've talked about the judiciary. After that, we've talked about cause and effect of bad industrial relations. Then in the causes, we've talked about mental inertia on both management and workers. They don't want to understand the objectives and motives of each other. And various other issues that were prominent whenever we talked about industrial relation evolution in historical India. Okay. In effects also we've talked about, this is a basic generic thing. We've by each stakeholder we've discussed. Then what will be the effect of bad industrial relations? And we had come to the conclusion that bad industrial relations is bad for each and everyone. So it is essential for each stakeholder to sit together, understand each other's interests, and work on a social dialogue where both can work on a platform where both can address their issues. In the next lecture, we'll continue all the approaches to understand industrial relations, and this will be the last lecture for this chapter. Okay, in this we'll cover all these approaches: sociological approach, psychological, Gandhian, human resource, Oxford, alternate systems approach. See, Dunlop we have discussed earlier. All of these approaches we will cover one by one. Okay, and then we can discuss about perspectives also, theoretical perspectives, in which we will discuss about unitary perspective, Gandhian Marxist perspectives, pluralistic perspective. Okay, and then our chapter will be finished. Okay, I hope today's lecture was good. So we'll continue to work on our studies. In this way, we can finish industrial relations as fast as possible. I'll try to provide you the latest figures also whenever I can. Okay, thank you so much.